Hello there and welcome, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you the top 10 most amazing Ark Tames. So without wasting any more time, without further ado, let's get straight into it. In at number 10 we've got the Tyrannus, and I'm putting this creature here because everyone really realistically does use the UT in a given boss battle scenario. You'll use it with that roar that it has, which essentially buffs your own creatures up, and also they will take less damage. It is called the Courage Roar, and they also do have a Fear Roar as well, although that's not really commonly used as it does have a size limit. But still, if someone's trying to raid your base on a Pteranodon, you can actually use that Fear Roar, and that player will lose complete control of the flyer that they're riding. Or it could be a glider in the case if maybe they're on one of those smaller other gliders. Just some nice PvP tips for you people out there if you know you're in need of that, because sometimes you might be in a scenario where you have a UT and you need to get a Pteranodon away from your base with an enemy player on it. Just simply use that Fear Roar. But I also find they're great general carnivores as well. They have quite a lot of speed and mobility on them, which you don't really get on a Rex. Yes, the Rex is a great boss creature, but still it doesn't really stand. It's one of those amazing Ark Tames for me because it's not really as versatile, and some people might forget about the UT apart from those other that boss use, of course, that I already mentioned, because you really can get a lot out of this creature, and it just people generally don't, and that's what I don't like about this creature, or what I don't like the outlook on this creature, is people don't really use it as much as they should in their uses that I think it really works in. So continuing on, we have got the Crystal Wyvern, and this could be of any variety, just whichever one you find preferable. For me, it is the Blood Crystal Wyvern. I know there isn't a Blood Crystal Wyvern here, this is simply just a tropical one, but I know a lot of you down in the comments have been really liking the Ember Crystal Wyverns, and I do definitely agree with that. They are quite a nice Wyvern to have. And the reason why I say these are so much more amazing than just the regular old Wyvern is I find there's a lot more variety, and also just generally they have nicer special abilities. Yes, breathing fire or lightning or poison or ice is still definitely something cool and useful, but they're a lot more inventive with the Crystal Wyvern abilities, and I find, considering just how easy they are to tame compared to the normal Wyvern, it really is a no-brainer just to get these instead. Yes, they are locked behind kind of a level 60 barrier, and you do need to get that Primal Crystal, so you need to knock out a Crystal Wyvern first, but I don't find that to be too much of an issue when taming these things. I really don't struggle with it as much as raiding a Wyvern trench. And yes, you can do it with a Field Hawk, and it's not the hardest thing in the world. You can do it with the Griffin relatively easily as well. But then you've also got to go through the whole raising process, and really it's a lot of time and effort you have to put into it, especially on official. Whereas with these creatures, yes, maybe getting to the level 60 might be a little bit of a challenge, but as soon as that passive tame is finished with that Primal Crystal, you've got yourself one of these things, and they really are just great flyers to have. It's 100% worth getting one. So the Snow Owl, I find, often is very much used, but also not often talked about in a way, because I find that yes, loads of people use this thing, but they don't talk about it as much as they should, just considering how great this creature is. And some might say, well, there's just simply better creatures out there, and I will agree, it's not the cream of the crop, it's not the best Ark creature out there, but it definitely is one of those most amazing ones in my opinion. But obviously, considering that we're only in the number 8 spot, there is still going to be a lot more to come with this creature. Namely, they do have the dive bomb ability, which you can also find on the Desmodus and the Griffin, a terrific ability which I really do love, as it vastly increases the speed that a flyer can travel at, even if they're just general coasting in terms of their flying is not the fastest. If the RG had this ability, it would be absolutely insane. The RG is actually later on in the list, by the way, if you're wondering about that thing. They also do have, not the RG, the Snow Owl in this case, you can probably tell that already. They have a heat-seeking UV ability where, you know, you can spot out and scout out any creature. Just apply this to what you really think it would be. And also they can heal any kind of creature as well, that being your own creatures, wild creatures, or tamed ones. It goes around full circle. And also this is really useful as well if you're knocking out a wild creature and yeah, its health is simply too low. You've pumped so many tranks into it that its health is really low, but also it's still not knocked out yet, and sometimes you might get this on some wrecks as if they've been battling stuff before, their health is already quite low, and you start knocking them out and it really gets to a stage where you can't put any more tranks into them. Then simply use one of these things to heal them back up, and you will not regret the benefits of this, because then their torpor won't go down so much where you have to wait. And also sometimes if you go out of render distance on single player, this actually always happens on single player, if you go out of render, they're not going to keep healing up on servers. You can maybe just log off and then log back on, but so there's a little bit of inconvenience in that. Obviously you can also just heal up your own creatures as well in whatever situation that you might find yourself in. But also the snow owl pellets can be used a lot for getting great loot out of gadgets. I feel like I said also a lot on that, but anyway, continuing on with the list. So in at number 7 we've got the Reaper. It feels a little bit weird to be putting this creature in at number 7, but considering I don't really use it as much, and yes, it really fits into its map perfectly and all of that, I kind of have to degrade it slightly where it is on the list, because personally I am also factoring just generally how amazing these creatures are to use and how often I kind of use them as well. Yes, I'm slightly shifting the word around a bit, as you could say, well, this is amazing creature to tame, and it's truly amazing because it deals loads of damage and it just really is a great creature to have. But personally it's not one of my favorites in regard of just general use. Yes, I'll use it tons on a map like Arboration, or on Gen 2 as well I use it a fair bit considering they spawn on the map, but I don't tend to transfer these across maps just to use one of these things. I don't like them quite that much, although there is really no better feeling than taming a Reaper for the first time, especially on Arboration, because there is a long process in it, and it would be a big shame to not include them on the list considering just how cool and amazing they look, just how great they are as creatures. They deal tons of damage, they really do pack a lot of punch, and they can travel quite far as well, almost maybe as far as a Carcanos can throw some kind of dodo or Listrosaurus. That's another pretty amazing creature as well, although it is not making the list today, but I guess it got a little brief honourable mention. In this list, the Shadowmane really did need to be talked about. Come on, this creature is packed full of all kinds of abilities. It does deserve to be here. Firstly, it is an extremely mobile creature for its size, and yes, while the Thyla does a similar sort of thing, in a way it doesn't really compare to the amount of height that you can get out of this thing. There is a serious amount of mobility withheld, and yes, it cannot climb any kind of wall or vertical surface. Once you see this jump in the B-roll here, you'll realise that you're never gonna need any of that. It can really jump to insane heights, and it's actually still a little bit crazy to me every time I do it, because although these are amazing creatures, I don't actually use these the most often. I've kind of come off them a little bit recently, but I've also kind of been coming off Ark a bit recently. I haven't really been playing a lot since ASA came out, really, actually, because I've kind of been put off because of the game a little bit. They're also really great underwater tames though, and they have the hydration buff, they can go invisible, they have the pack buff, they're great for bosses, and they have natural armor too. The only real not amazing thing about them is just the horrible taming method, which I will still never like to this day. In at number 5 we've got the Baryonyx. This creature definitely does deserve to be here. It is my all-time favourite caving creature, and it really does have a lot going for it, namely obviously that caving ability, which basically means it is the perfect size to fit into any cave, and with that size as well it also packs enough punch. Also, don't mind about all the dead creatures that you're probably seeing around the map. You'll see a dead Yuti later in this B-roll. I heard someone wondering about that last time. Yes, the B-rolls are recorded within quick succession, and after I'm done with the B-roll, the creatures do sadly die with a command, which I'm pretty sure it's just kill, isn't it? That's the command you put in to kill creatures. Also, on top of that as well, these are really fast, speedy creatures, and they're great in the water too, with that spin attack on the right click as well. You can summon creatures up to the size of a Megalodon, which just generally makes them quite good for underwater caving as well. They're already great just for regular caving, but now for underwater caving too. Well, they have been for a while, ever since they released, because they are just generally really great underwater tames. Some people don't really like them as much, as they say they only really eat fish, and fish is a bit of an annoying thing to get. Coelacanths are absolutely everywhere if you know where to look for them. That really is not an issue which you should be running into. So the Desmodus is one of those creatures where it has to be on an amazing creatures list. Not only can it make Sanguine Elixir, which is an absolute feat for doing any kind of tames, essentially doing 30% of it for you with a click of a button, they are also blood bag farms, and also you can just with that tame even more Desmoduses and also Bloodstalkers. And I'm going to give the Bloodstalker an honourable mention here as well, as it really is truly an amazing creature for me. I just couldn't find a place to fit it on the list today, so I didn't, but personally I would say it deserves to be in the realms of the number 5 to number 3 spot, and it really does, in my opinion, deserve to be here. It's just there's some other creatures which I think deserve it slightly more, and I put them there instead, but I decided I'd talk about it a little bit because it's really just a great underwater mount and I love it so much. It's generally a great travel mount. It's really cool model design, generally amazing creatures to use. Once you've got over the learning curve of controlling one, they are fabulous. Now just a little brief thing to finish on the Desmodus. They are also gliders. They can grip onto any kind of wall, vertical surface like the Tapejara, even just ceilings, and they can pick players off mounts with absolute ease for you PvP players out there. Now the RG has always been an all-time favourite of mine, so I had to include it in at the number 3 spot on the list. This creature has driven me through many years of Ark, and at this point almost a decade. These creatures are just one of my favourites, and although there are some slightly better creatures for travel and just with general amazingness in the RG, they really do deserve to be on here for their massive contribution to my Ark playing over the years. I always get so much nostalgia when riding an RG as well, or just when watching videos of people on RGs, and especially that old RG model. Yes, albeit a lot worse than the new one, has a lot of nostalgia in it. Either way, the RG is like the best metal carrier out there, having weight reduction on things like metal, crystal, and obsidian. I'm pretty sure it's 50%, although my numbers can be a little bit out to date sometimes because I'm not really playing a lot of Ark at the moment. Like I have said, ever since ASA came out, I've just been a little bit off put by Ark in general. But they can also pick up tons of creatures as well, which really does play to their benefit. You pair them with an Anki and a Dodic, you can get loads of metal, stone, crystal, obsidian, all of those resources which you really do need. They also have a smithy as a saddle, so if you've ever done some caving, which I like to do a lot, then you can just repair your armor if those pesky arthur players have got it, or if any of your pikes or gear or swords or things like that have been broken. Can easily repair them as long as you've got some metal ingots in the saddle of the RG, because I don't like to go back to my base just to repair some armor because I usually decays in quick succession. And they also have a nice healing regen thing. In at number 2 we've got the Maewing, and this is really the king of travel, and it only just scrapes past the RG. I was tempted to put the RG in at the number 2 spot because of just how amazing that creature is, but the Maewing is just so much more amazing at speed and ease of travel that it needs to be here, as a lot of the recent Ark playing that I've done, or the scarcity of recent Ark playing that I've been doing, has been just generally a lot of travelling and exploring maps. I know it's not really the thing that you're going to be doing the most, but travelling from A to B is definitely something which you're going to need to do in Ark a lot, and that this really is the best creature out there for it. It's so quick, so mobile, so easy to use once you've just got over that first general learning curve, and it can be used really on any map and it works just fantastically. Yes, on Arboration a rock drake is going to do better, but they really don't need a lot of elevation to work like the rock drake does, which is obviously why they're much more of a favourite when it comes to travel. They can also skim across the top of the water, they're pretty good swimmers as well. They also are a portable feeding trough for you breeders out there, and they're not the worst berry gatherers too, so you've really got a lot of abilities in one. And considering the saddle unlocks at level 18, it is really a no-brainer to put them in at the number 2 spot. And at number 1 is the Deinonychus, and this always tops my list. I don't know what it is for me, but I do know what it is because I put it here. I don't know why. I've said that twice on some lists now. But this creature is just so good as a boss creature, and so good as a general travel mount. Yes, maybe not as great as the Maewing. I've been using the Maewing a lot recently, but I've still been using the Deinonychus a lot just for land travel and a bit more deeper and in-depth exploration instead of just flying around the map just like a madman. They also can grapple onto creatures and deal tons of bleed damage to them, which is obviously extremely useful, especially in boss fights, as it actually still does bleed damage to bosses, which as far as I'm concerned, no other Ark creature does. They also have the pack wealth as well, which again is going to boost them even more in boss fighting scenarios. They really are the go-to for that. Unless you're on extinction, then use a Giga or a Carcharodontaurus. Probably Carcharodontaurus, because their health is a lot more reliable, as they do not have the rage buff. Again, they're two great, amazing creatures as well, and the Giga has really been through a lot with me, and I guess I'll give it a brief honourable mention here as well, because they really do deserve to be in this list somewhere, except I just couldn't really find a place considering all the other creatures that I put on this list instead, because I just find all of those to be more amazing to me. Also, the Rhyniognatha on top of this takes no fall damage whatsoever, and it can climb up any kind of wall or vertical surface like the Thyla can. Not quite as elegant as a solution, but I still really don't mind it whatsoever, and it works perfectly for me. This is the most amazing Ark creature out there, with no doubts. In at number 10, we've got the Crystal Wyvern, and you could say just the regular Wyvern as well. It's just I kind of have a preference for Crystal Wyverns, so I'm just going to put them on the list instead of normal Wyverns. But, you know, if you don't really like the Crystal Wyverns for whatever reason, then normal Wyverns it is. And actually, it is a very well-known fact that Wyverns are pretty much the fastest land flyers out there. These things have insane agility when it comes to actual just flying, gliding not included, even though there are obviously a lot of gliders in this list, and that does count as a more speedy tame. But in the sake of just flying around, these things are actually pretty speedy when it comes to it, for obviously that main flying. They're faster than the Pteranodon and a Tapejara, of course, and way faster than something like the Quetzal. That is an insanely slow creature. And even though you can't level up movement speed anymore for flyers without obviously enabling flyer speed leveling, or with the classic flyers mod, obviously those two options accessible on single player only unless you're a host of a server, these things are still going to offer a great amount of speed, and you're really not going to be worrying about the speed of these things, considering that they are definitely some really fast tames, and considering how easy the Crystal Wyverns are, they are a really great option for your first flyer on Crystal Isles. Next up, we've got the Rhyniognatha, and this is definitely one of the newer flyers which has been added into Ark, but it definitely does need to be put on this list for many reasons, namely because of the speed. Actually, there's not really many reasons. It's speedy. That is how the Rhyniognatha works. And if you didn't know already, it spawns on the island and the Lost Island. They're your only two maps and your only options. On ASA as well, just as a little bonus, they are nowhere near as rare to find, unless obviously you're playing on the normal version of Ark. Then, well, I can't really say normal, they're both normal, but the old version of Ark has a much rarer Rhyniognatha spawn than the new one, and actually it seems a bit like an overspawn for the new one. There just seems to be Rhyniogathas everywhere, but you can always raise your dino count, use the destroy wild dinos command if you want to tame yourself a Rhyniognatha on the older version of Ark and you're on a single player world and you have access to those commands, of course. But how do you actually tame one of these things as well? And this is the only creature on this list which I'm really going to talk about its tame method in great detail, because it's quite a difficult one. In terms of what you do, you kill a male Rhyniognatha to get that pheromone, then tame yourself a Bronto or equivalent creatures that work. Bronto's the best. Get all those resources on screen, not necessary of course, only optional. You only need them if you want 100% effectiveness, and for these things I don't really think it matters all too much. Then you'll want to trap your Rhyniognatha and damage it as much as you can. Obviously, don't kill it, that would be absolutely awful and a huge waste of time in actually trapping the creature and just the creature itself, especially on the old version of Ark, considering how rare these things actually are on that version of the game. And you may need to give it some additional hits as well, because these things do actually heal ridiculously quick. Then you want to feed that pheromone gland to whatever creature you're doing, and then this is the time where you want to get out all of those craving resources and have them ready in your inventory, as your creature is going to need them during the process, which is just about to happen after this, which is where your dino is impregnated by the Rhyniognatha. That's when the cravings will happen. Afterwards it will roll over and your creature will die, which, you know, could be a little bit sad, don't be the most important one, and then out comes a baby Rhyniognatha. Now the Griffin is making making an appearance on the list, and for good reason, mainly because of that gliding ability, being a prime choice for doing any kind of Wyvern Trench raids on Ragnarok and other maps where these things spawn, which also Wyverns spawn on. And Valguero is no, I don't know actually. Valguero does have the Griffin Trench, but either way, especially on Ragnarok, I should have just stuck to that example. These creatures are very widely used for those Wyvern Trench runs, and for good reason, considering their insane gliding speed. And this does have a bit of movement speed on it, by the way. This isn't the actual speed, but this is the early days of B-roll, and this is actually the first piece of B-roll which I ever recorded for the channel, and it's still kicking around today. Actually, there's a nice little memory of when I started doing the top 10s, and there's actually audio attached to this as well, but obviously that has been muted as I'm talking over it with me now, because me about 6 months ago, for some reason I'm ridiculously slow at talking. But also, on top of the Griffin's insane speed, don't know why that's so hard to say, these things are also really great at dealing damage as well, and that glide ability can also inflict damage onto the creatures as well. If you dive bomb them, I think that's what it's called, and you'll see it being used here, and it is actually a pretty useful tactic and a very unpredictable one if you're going up some players in Ark, which, you know, may be somewhat predictable if people know the Griffin, but you can definitely be very sneaky with those glide attacks. And again, very, very great for doing any kind of Wyvern Trench runs. You can get quickly in there and quickly out with no trouble whatsoever. In at number 7, we have the Managarmr, and this creature definitely does have to be put on the speedy tames list. And I think for this creature being a speedy tame, it definitely does make sense. Like, this creature can absolutely zip across the map, although it does have a slight kind of learning curve to it, so I'm not actually going to put it as high as maybe it could have ranked. And also, I don't know, I'm not really kind of into this creature as much as some of the other creatures, and I don't think that as useful of a speedy creature, which is why some creatures like the Gallimimus I'm just not going to put on this list, partly because there are definitely some faster creatures out there, but I don't really enjoy using them, and the Managarmr is kind of one of those, and considering its bugginess as well, I don't think it is the fastest when you really take everything into comparison, although it definitely is a very speedy tame and worthy of this list. You just might say the creature after it and the one after that is just a little bit slower than it, and maybe you could say that, but over longer distances those creatures are going to hold up a lot better than this thing. This is definitely more of a short burst distancing creature, but also with their freeze ability they are definitely very useful, not just for speed but also for freezing things, which is a surprisingly OP ability actually, considering how long these things freeze other creatures for. The only thing to watch out for is the bugs. Next up, we've got the Snow Owl, and this is one of the most revolutionary flyers out there in my opinion, and it is so widely used by every Ark player that has ever set eyes on one of these creatures, and I'm pretty sure they're available on Fjorda as well, not just on Extinction, so you can dig into these creatures even more if you are on any of those maps. Of course, Extinction and Fjorda I think are the only two maps where these things spawn. The reason why I'm mentioning that is Extinction is a paid DLC map and Fjorda is a free one, so it is a lot more accessible, and I know a lot of you down there who watch these videos do actually play Fjorda, so you know it kind of makes sense why I'd mention that. But obviously their main speed does come from that gliding ability, which is very similar to the Griffins, but it always just seems faster and with a lot more agility than the Griffin, and there's kind of a tier list to it, as the next creature is a glider, the next one after that as well is a glider but with even more speed, and even the creature which is in at number 1 is a glider as well, so there's definitely something to be said for this method of travel. And as well, they do have a sort of heat seeking ability to spy out any people who might be trying to raid your base in a PvP scenario, or any creatures which may be missing in a PvE one. You also want to level up that stamina so you can heal these creatures up so quickly, as obviously that is something which is going to be essential in any kind of boss fight or battle obviously, because you're going to want to heal up those creatures quickly and efficiently, and you can do it somewhat more efficiently than the Daedon, and especially on extinction you can actually keep that creature alive, as the Daedon really isn't going to rack up against any of the Titans. But it's also useful if you're taming a creature and its health is really low. Then if it's wild, obviously it's not yours, you can't heal it with a Daedon, but you can heal it with a Snow Owl, which is just a nice little thing as well. And with their pellets on top of that too, these things can gather insane loot out of any kind of gacha, which is definitely something to be said, and something which is a very nice thing to have, which no other Ark creature can offer. And if you do have Extinction or Fjorda, definitely go for the Snow Owl. In at number 5 is the Desmodus, and this creature is yet again another glider along the glider tier list, as this one feels even more fast than the Snow Owl, and with even more agility and some nicer abilities to go on top of that as well. Although the speed is the main thing which we're going to be talking about here, again with that gliding ability, and the fact that the stamina drain is also very minimal as well. Like the Snow Owl, it definitely does benefit these creatures hugely, and I do really enjoy the speed which you can get out of a creature like this. And also the gliding doesn't seem too far off primitiveness, which is always a nice thing to have in Ark, because I don't particularly like all the techie creatures, although the creature in at number 2 is a kind of techie one, but still I kind of prefer the primitiveness of this creature and the kind of Nordicness of it as well. Considering that Fjorda is a very Nordic map, it's a nice quality for this creature to have, and again with that glide ability you can get some serious speed out of these things. Next up we've got the Rock Drake, and yet again another glider, this time packing a lot of punch in terms of the damage department. You should really look at this thing. It deals so much damage in terms of actually, like, its damage to size ratio and damage to speed ratio is frankly stupid in terms of actually just how powerful this creature is. But it really does make it a very useful one, and although not the greatest on maps that aren't Arboretion, it definitely has to be said to be a fast creature, and definitely one of the faster ones in the game, obviously being even above the top 5 in this list that we've got here today, which obviously mean it must be fast. I'm not giving you the best example here considering I'm in quite flat terrain, but the stamina drain is pretty low, so when these things are actually in some proper serious action, they can glide for a long while. And also on top of that, they can grab onto any kind of walls, and also they can kind of zoom onto walls as well, as long as they are close enough to them. And obviously when your HUD is enabled, which it isn't here, just for the sake of the B-roll, you'll get a little crosshair on your screen when obviously you can grapple on to those rock faces. So it's not like you just have to spam click buttons and then as soon as you get close enough, there you go, you can now click on it, but you don't really know when you're close enough. No, it is quite obvious to tell because of that marker. Just for the sake of the B-roll, I've turned the HUD off, so obviously that isn't there, although it is pretty easy to judge with your eyes as well. Just, you know, a little bit of assistance is nice. And if you haven't already, definitely go and tame yourself the Rock Drake. You'll have an absolute blast with this thing. In at number 3 is the Bloodstalker, the living Spider-Man. This creature definitely is one when it comes to any form of agility, and it really can't be backed down for that skill, and it is one which actually hardly any other, if not any other, spider in Ark possesses, as the Rhynio is one of the most downright useless creatures out there. But it is also really quick and agile on the surface of the water and under the water too, which can't be said to some other creatures on this list, and it definitely is one of the more versatile ones, being used for a wide range of things. And I actually use it mainly underwater, as it is a really viable underwater tame. But obviously with this really fast grappling, it makes it one of the fastest creatures out there, as it can really quickly zip between any kind of tall object, and it can't just grapple onto trees, it can grapple onto many other things as well. And the range of the limit on what it can grapple to is absolutely insane as well. It's not like you can only grapple onto things which are really close to you. is probably at least maybe 50 to 100 meters, which is actually a substantial amount, and it could even be more than that. I haven't really measured any of it, and there is a huge benefit to this as well, as you get yourself a really great agile travel mount. But also on Gen 1 there are missions which you'll benefit from for having faster Bloodstalker flying skills. The alpha one of which I have done, as well as the gamma and the beta ones too, but the alpha one obviously does offer the most hexagons, and those are an extremely useful virtual resource on an already virtual game. But you know, doubly virtual, very useful on Gen 1. In at number 2 is the Astrodelphus, but also the Tropeognathus. I'm just going to shoehorn them both in together as they kind of move in the exact same way, although the Astrodelphus is the kind of main one here, but Tropeognathus I'm going to put as a little honorable mention, as it is an extremely fast tame as well. And you know, it didn't really make the list in terms of what the B-roll says, but I'm saying it also goes here too. They kind of go hand in hand with each other, as they use a fuel which adds to their saddle, and then they can travel at absolutely insane speeds across the map. And it really doesn't seem like it may be traveling this fast at this time, but considering that these things fly consistently and they only stop when they run out of fuel, it's insane over long distances, and it really is a very, very viable one. And considering with the Tropeognathus it can gain speed as it points further down, it does have a huge benefit as well, and so can the Astrodelphus increase its speed as well. And on top of that, fire all kinds of lasers like the Tropeognathus with all kinds of grenades, and these really are fighting machines of the air, and they have to be pretty much the fastest out there in the game, obviously only beaten by the creature in at number 1. But what actually is that creature? In at number 1 just had to be the Maewing. This creature is one of the fastest, if not the fastest creature in the game, and it kind of has to be, considering I'm putting it in at the number 1 spot. Sorry Syntac, the galley just simply doesn't make the cut. But either way, in terms of this thing, it is probably the most efficient glider out there, and with also the fact that its saddle is unlocked at level 19, it really does have something to be said that you can have this so early on in the game, and it is the best travel mount out there in my opinion, and actually the fastest travel mount really out there in my opinion. And you may be able to get a creature which can go faster for a short amount of time, but over long distances these creatures are going to be your biggest friend with absolutely insane traveling speeds, obviously increasing as you shoot further down like the Tropeognathus and the Astrodelphus, but I think this is even faster than all of those, and I really do credit its speed, especially considering the level it is unlocked at. And also it does act as a feeding trough as well, which is just a nice little ability to have, and actually it doesn't really do that bad on same elevation terrain, which some other gliders really do struggle with. And obviously it can gather berries too, which is just a nice little bonus which I think we all really need to appreciate. But anyway, that is the end of today's video, and I really hope that you all enjoyed this one, as I did really enjoy making it. And as always, comment down below what is the fastest Ark creature in your opinion, and I'll see you all later.